Let's just reflect on what Vince Cable said there for a moment. His language was, I think, quite shocking. The point at which it collapses in regards to Brexit talks, I don't know. I suspect a year down the road, tracks something catastrophic will occur. That is the backdrop of Vince Cable. That's what he's propagating. The risks from Brexit are rising in terms of rhetoric. Have you seen a discussion of that around the country? Are people becoming more concerned and sharing Vince Cable's view?
Well, I think there are two schools of thought, really, Manus. One is amongst those businesses who are simply trying to screen all this political noise out and focus on the fundamentals of their own firms. They're saying, I need to take decisions based on the business conditions I see today, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Others are being stalled, are seeing their confidence hit by this endless drip of political opinion. And you see it on all sides of the spectrum. Those who think we can leave without a deal, without any difficulty whatsoever, and those like Mr. Cable who believe on the other side that talks could collapse and that it would be very, very dangerous indeed. We hear a ton of this stuff, but when you dig into the fundamentals of what's going on in British business, actually it does leave me a little bit concerned, because what you are seeing is a slowdown in some of those key indicators.
Yeah, we'll come to some of the detail of your survey in just a moment, but on the subject of the relationship between business and government, the election has changed a lot of things. The election has rid Theresa May of her majority. Have things changed in that relationship? Has it been reset, the relationship between business and government? Are government doors more open now than they were?
Well, I think they certainly are more open than they were prior to the election. Indeed, I seem to be spending about half of my time at the moment engaging with various cabinet ministers on some of the key issues for business. Now, that's a welcome shift. This mood that the economy has to be put back front and centre again, after a period where it didn't seem to feature at all in the UK's political debate, has to be welcomed. And I do see a sincerity and a greater sense of realism amongst these cabinet ministers about the various things that are important to business.
So this is broad. It's not just number 11 listening, the Chancellor and the Treasury. It's not just the Treasury listening to business, but this is a willingness to listen to business from all of the parts of government machinery.
I'm seeing it across the piece. I am seeing a real gear shift in terms of that engagement with business. That has to be positive.
Do you feel a sense of confidence, and we will get to the report, just very quickly, do you have a sense of confidence that everybody's feeding in? Is there a great coagulator? Is there one central point pulling all of these pieces of reports together, Adam? Do you feel confident that this government has got a grip on all the feed-in from business?
I don't think that any British government has ever faced in peacetime the sort of operation that they need to be dealing with on this particular subject.
But that's not a good enough excuse.
There are so many different moving parts in Brexit, so I don't think we are yet tooled up enough to get the outcomes that we need. I would like to get more comfort, for example, on some of the technical issues. We focus a lot, for example, on customs and how you get exports overseas and things like that. There are huge systems that sit behind that sort of stuff. Are they ready? No, they're not. We have more to do.
This is complex, and some in business have been calling for, the CBI was saying we need to stay in the single market until a post-Brexit trade deal is done. Some business leaders have been saying, look, a transition can't be 3 months long. It's got to be 5 to 10 years. Is the thing standing in the way of a long transition the political calendar? Do you sense that that is the timetable that government is working to?
Well, I'm certainly working on the assumption that we will have a transition period. I'm working on the assumption, like many of my members have said, that it should be at least 3 years in length, that we'd be looking at 2022 before a final deal is in place.
Which is when the next election would be.
Indeed.
But what about pushing it beyond that? Is there any appetite?
Indeed. Well, we want businesses to have one set of adjustment costs, not one set of adjustment costs on exit and another one when a deal is reached. I don't actually care when the UK election is. That's a Westminster problem, not a business problem. The business problem is avoiding too sharp shocks or too sharp changes to trading conditions. We must avoid that at all costs.
Is this reflected? I think the top line here is your report. We finally got there, which is a subdued second quarter and challenges ahead. Break it down for us. How widespread is that subduedness, and where does it peak?
Well, we see a lot of our different indicators, whether they're domestic sales and orders, exports in some sectors. They're off the boil, certainly. I think the one bright spot that I see in this is that some of the inflationary pressures and price pressures that firms are facing are a little bit less acute than they were for us in the first quarter. That has to be a good thing, because a lot of companies were seeing their margins very, very squeezed. But we don't see that kind of strong appetite for big growth, for big investment that we would have done perhaps even a year ago. And I think the services sector is the one that I'd explicitly say, you know, looks slower. than the manufacturing sector, and that's interesting.
That is interesting, because I was going to ask you about the export drive. Clearly, a lot of people in government want to do big trade deals. They can't do them right now, but they want to do them fairly soon after Brexit. Are we seeing a pickup from your members? Do they talk to you about a pickup in export activity? How does that rub up against an economy that typically is specialised in services? You know, that is the big chunk of it.
Well, in terms of goods exports, we do see some manufacturers saying that they're benefiting from lower sterling, you know, having sterling 15% lower than it was.
In the EU.
Correct. They've still got access to all of the trade deals and the market access that they've had up until now. Grandfathering those, making sure we have access to them in the future is a big priority. A lot of manufacturers are saying things are solid right now. If they're importing a lot, though, they're saying it's a bit of a double-edged sword. They're saying they get it from both sides. They get the good pricing outbound and competitive pricing outbound, but they're paying a lot more for inputs.
Where are we on the wage pressure story? Unemployment data came in yesterday, the 42-year low. And actually wages, the March to May basic wage growth came in at 2%. Are your members beginning to say, look, we're seeing a bit of a squeeze here in terms of wages? Because that's the core of what the Bank of England needs to monitor.
We're not seeing a gigantic upward push in wage pressures coming back from Chamber and Chamber members, which is interesting because they're also saying to us repeatedly that people is their biggest single issue. They cannot get the people that they need, whether in their local communities where they're working or indeed when they have to go to look for them overseas as well, because sometimes that has been the case. That is the single biggest constraint on growth for many. So I'm a little bit surprised that we don't see wage pressures stronger than they are.